Called to order the July 6th meeting of the Saline County Board of Commissioners. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Shadwick.
Here.
Commissioner Sparks.
Here.
Commissioner Vidrickson.
Here.
Commissioner Weiss.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Please join me for the flag salute and remain standing for the moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, if everyone could make sure that all microphones, phones, and other electronic devices are muted when you are not speaking so that remote observers can hear the proceedings clearly, I would appreciate it. Now, if Brad, our IT director, could instruct everyone on how to raise their hand in the meeting.
Good morning.
Good morning,
For
Brad.
those that are in the meeting utilizing the Zoom client, if you select the participants tab toward the bottom of the screen, this will reveal a raise hand function over toward the lower right-hand portion of your screen. If you select the raise hand, that will let the host know that you would like to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. At this time, we will move into our citizens input portion of the meeting where citizens may speak on county government, usually limited to 3 minutes and pertaining to items that will not be discussed on today's agenda. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak at this time? Seeing none, at this time, we will move to our consent agenda, which consists of approval of prior minutes as presented on June 22nd and June 29th, approval of tax roll adjustments, and approval of public forum agenda as presented. Are there any commissioners who wish to add or delete items from consent agenda? Hearing no objections, could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. At this time, we'll move into the action items. Item 1.
RFA 194-21, Prudent RX Change Form, Business Associate Addendum and Participation Group Agreement with Marilyn Leamer, Human Resources Director.
Good morning, Marilyn.
Good morning, Commissioners. This request is requesting approval and signature of the Prudent RX prescription change form, business associate addendum, and the participation group agreement. The Prudent RX plan will be added to our current prescription plan beginning October 1 of 21, and it would apply to higher cost specialty medications. So that will also take advantage of the manufacturer copay assistance programs. The employee, if they do not enroll in this, their monthly copay will increase to 30% of the cost of the medication. If they do enroll, their copay will be zero, so no cost to them. And the manufacturer actually picks up that copay. Prudent RX does take a program fee of 25% of savings, but the savings to our plan is estimated to be in excess of $37,000 over the plan year. Prudent RX will coordinate employee enrollments with both current participants or that are utilizing specialty medications and then also any future enrollments. And this is actually just an added component to our current pharmacy benefit managers. Just one more thing that they're going to be adding on to this. The alternatives for action is to sign the documents. Do not sign the documents or delay for further information. Our recommendation is to sign the forms. There's no additional budget impact. This program actually saves both the participating members money in the way of their copays and then overall plan costs. And I'm available
Thank you.
for questions.
Are there any questions or comments?
And specialty medications are generally the really high cost ones, such as cancer fighting prescriptions.
And the way that you say this is that each individual, each one of us have to sign a document.
No, this will actually only at this current time affect 3 employees that are utilizing specialty medications.
Okay.
And Prudent RX will coordinate that enrollment with those employees. And then if any additional members have to be prescribed a specialty medication, they will coordinate the enrollment at that time.
Okay, thank you. All right. Remember, members of the public who wish to speak. Or bring it back to the commission for more discussion or possible action.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve by signature the change form, addendum, and participation group agreement as presented by staff.
Second the motion.
Are there any other comments? All those in favor, I have been moved and seconded that we approve RFA number 194-21, Prudent RX Change Form, Business Associate Addendum and Participation Group Agreement. All those favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Move on to the next item.
RFA 193-21, Earl Bain Building Improvement Repairs Grant with Rosie Walter, Department of Senior Services Director.
Good morning, Rosie.
Good morning. Senior Services is requesting commission approval to accept $10,000 in grant funding from the Earl Bain Foundation. The grant application was submitted to the Earl Bain Foundation requesting funding for a new Meals on Wheels drive-through, outbuilding repair, tuck pointing of the second and third floors of the building, and replacement of all windows. And the alternatives for actions: accept or deny grant funding from the Earl Bain Foundation. Staff recommendation is to accept grant funding from the Earl Bain Foundation in the amount of $10,000 for building improvements and repairs. The budget impact: grant funds will be used for building improvement and repairs. There is no cost to seniors or to Saline County.
Thank you. Any comments or questions by the commissioners?
Good news.
I have a comment, Rosie, or question for you. You're doing such a wonderful job here of getting all these grants, and this is the second one now, I think, for the third one for the same projects.
Yes.
If we were lucky enough to get these done for less than what the grants have come to us for, would we have to give money back, or can we take that money and do something else with it? Or
For one of the grants that we have received, yes, you would. For the rest, no.
okay,
All right. Any other questions or comments by the commissioners? Any members of the public who wish to speak? I will bring it back to commission for more discussion or possible action.
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept grant funding from the Earl Bain Foundation in the amount of $10,000 as presented on RFA 193-21.
Second the motion.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve RFA number 193-21, Earl Bain Building Improvement Repairs Grant. Are there any further comments? If not, I will call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
Item 3.
RFA 195-21, Radio System Permit Agreement with Hannah Stambaugh, Deputy County Administrator.
Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning, Commissioners. So the design of the new radio system allowed for the use of an existing tower site that is owned by KDOT and located up at the Kansas Highway Patrol Training Center. This request for action is to formalize an agreement with KDOT that for our radio equipment that is installed and housed at that location to be there. Your alternatives are to approve the permit agreement with KDOT or not approve the permit agreement with KDOT. Staff recommends the approval of the permit agreement with KDOT, and there is no budget impact that is associated with this agreement. Saline County is not being charged for the use of this tower site. This is what we would call a beneficial use for both the state system as well as Saline County.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments by the commissioners? Any member of the public who'd wish to speak? I will bring it back to commission for more discussion or possible action.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve by signature the KDOT permit agreement as presented by staff.
Second.
Are there any further comments? If not, I will call for a vote. Excuse me. It has been moved and seconded that we approve RFA number 195-21 radio system permit agreement. I will now call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Item 4.
RFA 197-21 forestry grant approval with Hannah Stambaugh, Deputy County Administrator.
Good morning. I am here on behalf of Fire District Number 5. They submitted a grant application back in March of 2021 for a volunteer assistance grant through the Kansas Forest Service. They learned back last month that they were awarded a grant to up to a total of $4,774. This is a 50-50 grant through the Kansas Forestry Service, meaning that their Fire District Number 5's intent to purchase wildland fire gear will be purchased from their budget, and then they will be reimbursed up to 50% of that total cost of the wildland fire gear equipment by the Kansas Forestry Service grant. This request for action is to accept the grant funding, but then also award for the purchase of 14 sets of wildland fire gear by the vendor WFE for a total price of $4,529. The budget impact is that Fire District Number 5 has budgeted for this expenditure and will take the full amount, the $4,529, from the department's new equipment line item. And then the Kansas Forestry Service will reimburse the department for $2,264.50 after the items are received and paid for initially by the department.
Are there any questions or comments by the commissioners?
One question, Hannah, why did they not take the low bid?
Well, it says that their low bid is, that's because the co-pro piece of it, it was not the exact wildland fire gear that they were requesting. So there were different brands of it. This, the ones from WFE and D&Co will match the rest of the other wildland fire sets that they have on the department.
Just another quick, since you brought that up, and it's like, did the CoPro, did that meet the specifications?
I'm not exactly sure on that one.
All right, okay. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Any members of the public who wish to speak? I will bring it back to the commission for more discussion or possible action.
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the volunteer assistance grant and authorize the purchase of wildland gear.
Second the motion.
Are there any further comments? At this time, it has been moved and seconded that we approve RFA number 197-21 forestry grant approval. If not, we'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Nay?
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. Item 5.
RFA 198-21 task order number 1 with disaster recovery consultant with Philip Smith Haynes, County Administrator.
Good morning, Phil.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. This is our continuing series on the American Rescue Plan Act. As the commission is aware, because I've repeated it ad nauseum, we have received $10,532,376 in federal funds. And on May the 25th, your commission approved a contract with iParametrics to assist us in managing those grant funds. This is the first task order under that contract. At the time of approval of the contract, it's just the framework, and each specific task order and associated budget will come to the commission for further approval. This particular agreement calls for approximately 1,100 hours of their time. So basically just shy of, a half of a body for the next year. And would have a total cost of $144,700. That would all be paid for from federal grants. There would be no impact to the county budget. The task order represents about 1.4% of the awarded funds, which is well below the 5% reasonableness threshold for administration. They will be out here, as I've said a couple of times, 2 weeks from today for a presentation to your commission, and the day before they'll be having a public meeting out at 4-H. They also have a survey that will be going live today. Just sent that over to our IT staff to get that on the county's website. And probably most importantly, they will be preparing our first report to the Treasury, which is due at the end of August. So staff would recommend that the commission authorize the chair to sign task order number 1. You could, of course, not authorize that and direct staff to seek any desired revisions. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Administrator, my question would be, if $10,532,000, based on the numbers that I've heard, and we've already awarded $1.6 million from this contract to the airport authority, if I'm not mistaken, is that the same pot of money this is coming from?
Correct.
And the 144,000, so that leaves us approximately $8.7 million to award. Would that be kind of rough math?
Yeah, so it's about 80% of the total is still out there for award, and that's what the survey is intended to, garner public feedback on what people feel like is priorities for the commission to spend on. We certainly have some ideas based on what's eligible under the act and what some of the community needs are as we perceive them, but would like to get additional community feedback to make recommendations to this body.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to see where that money's going to go and how it can be best used in the community. So,
Any other questions or comments by the commission? Any members of the public who wish to speak? If not, I'll bring it back to the commission for more discussion or possible action.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve by signature task order number 1 with iParametrics.
second.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve RFA number 198-21, task order number 1 with Disaster Recovery Consultant. Are there any further comments? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Item number 6.
RFA 196-21, 2022 budget direction with Philip Smith Haynes, County Administrator.
Good morning, Philip.
Good morning again. Not a whole lot to say on this one. Last Tuesday, presented a draft budget to your commission for the 2022 fiscal year and warned you that I would be back today for some actual discussion and potential direction. So I'm happy to answer questions and receive your commission's direction regarding the 2022 budget.
Well, one of my concerns, Phil, is the appropriations part of it. And we direct our staff, and Rosie's a good example with senior services. We direct our staff to go out and hunt all the grants that they can possibly find before they come asking for money. And yet we're in this budget proposal, we're awarding all of the appropriated people their increases without knowing what they've done for grant funding and so forth. And I think we're being a little bit generous in several cases with just handing these organizations exactly what they're asking for, particularly when some of them are as much as 10 and 11%. So I'm concerned about that myself.
I can certainly understand your concern, Commissioner. Not trying to defend any particular appropriation, but each of those folks does appear before the commission. They came and made their pitches to you in May. And so, I mean, we can certainly for next year, or even, now, if you wanted to see it, we could ask them more specific questions about grant funding. We do, they do sort of send us a financial overview, but each one of them does that in a little bit of a different way. We could look at standardizing that for next year's process, or, I'm open to a number of different ways where we could better tighten up that information.
Although we do get, like Commissioner Vidrickson said, we do get the information from them. I'm not so sure that it's in the detail that I would like, especially in light of all the funds that have come from the federal government this year. Maybe their presentation was too early to say that, but I would be interested in, there's a lot of pot of monies out there, and what other federal money do they get? Again, I'm not picking on anybody. I mean, it's all of them. What other federal money was available to them and that they received that, that would justify an increase by the Saline County taxpayers? And I don't know whether that happens this year or next year, or I don't ever remember seeing any grant lines on any of the presentations, but my memory might not be right either.
So are you saying that it's appropriate, Phil, to perhaps ask a couple of these agencies or three to come back and give us an additional information or answer some questions? Is that appropriate for this year, or?
Certainly. I mean, I think anytime somebody's asking you for a couple $100,000, they ought to be willing to answer some questions. Given where we are in the process, coordinating their schedules might be a bit of a challenge, but I think we could certainly make that work between now and August.
Well, I certainly, if I'm the only one asking for that, which I may or may not be, then I would be for that. If there aren't three commissioners who at least three who want to pursue that avenue, I'm for doing that. If there's three that say don't do that, then I'll vote a different direction. So
It's kind of hard for us to throw curveballs at you this late in the game. I understand that and appreciate that, but something that always had me scratching my head is we appropriate money to Airport Authority and to trying to think of the organization. OCCK. No.
Economic development.
Yeah, economic development. And both of them we appropriate money to. Well, then Airport Authority also appropriates money back to the economic. It seems like we're giving them money for them to give to another agency. It's rather, I find that a little ironic.
So, Commissioner, we don't actually do an appropriation to the Airport Authority. We did do an airport subsidy for a number of years, an airfare subsidy. So that was specifically directed at reducing the cost of flying in and out of Salina. It was an economic development tool, but we don't do a general subsidy to the Airport Authority the way that we do to some other agencies. So there's just a bit of a nuance in there, but yeah, I get your point. We are, for example, we are doing the 1.6 million, that will be flowing through the Airport Authority, and yet they are also a funder for the economic development organization. So I do understand that. The nuance there is that the Airport Authority, because of the way their funding works, they're restricted on categories of things that they can spend money on. But yeah, I take your point about the sort of double funding.
I'm confident that our staff is looking in conjunction with our consultant in the big picture of this ARPA monies. And if there's anything possible that could be utilized, no different you did with the COVID money pot that we received, I'm confident you're going to find those mechanisms that will be able to be utilized for some of our budgetary concerns and needs.
Thank you. I guess that wasn't really a question, but I'll address it anyway. This budget does include some revenues from ARPA. They are fairly small and they are mainly targeted at courts. We have a high degree of confidence, as does our consultant, and I've actually found a piece in the federal guidelines that says that restoration of court services due to the impacts of COVID is an acceptable expense. So there is a revenue you'll see in the district court line as well as in the county attorney line budget, sorry, not line, new lines within their budget to pull down some of that ARPA revenue specifically to support additional expenses they have related to the reopening of the courts.
Okay, thank you. And as far as the subject at hand, the budget direction, my question is, how does our revenue neutral rates publications dovetail into this request?
Thank you for that question, Commissioner. So in this legislative session, the state passed Senate Bill 13, and that does a number of different things, including ending the tax lid. So you'll recall that for the past 5 years or so, we've been living under this tax lid where our ad valorem property taxes could only go up by a certain amount each year that was based on the rolling rate of inflation. And there were all sorts of adjustments to it. It was sort of a kind of a Swiss cheese tax lid. And so SB 13 does away with that. So you will see that there are 3 pages that were in last year's budget that just don't exist this year because they were the calculations for all of that are no longer relevant. What is new this year and goes into effect this year, the legislature had a discussion on delaying it a year and they elected not to, is this concept of a revenue neutral rate. And so what this is that when the county clerk receives the valuation information from the county appraiser, she calculates the amount of millage that would generate last year's, or well, actually the current year's, 2021's revenue when applied to the valuations for 2022. So our current mill rate for the county is 40.606. And according to the calculation from the clerk, the mill rate for next year that would generate that same level of revenue is 40.314, I believe was the number. And so we receive that number from the clerk, both for the county and for each of the fire districts. And The county, because of some non-property tax revenues, things like sales tax and rents and leases and that sort of thing, the county is able to come up with a budget for 2022 that funds a number of priorities of this commission without touching that revenue neutral rate. In fact, the budget it is currently in draft form. The mill rate would go down a little over a mill. That is not the situation for our fire districts. So 6 of the 7 rural fire districts, their mill rates, either to just maintain their existing budgets, or some of them have some slight increases related to the radio project. 6 of those 7 districts, their mill rates would exceed their revenue neutral rate. So when you are projected to exceed your revenue neutral rate under this new legislation, you are required to notify the county clerk no later than July 20th. And then between August 20th and September 20th, you hold a revenue neutral rate hearing and take comments from the public about exceeding your revenue neutral rate. Then after that hearing, either on the same day or at a subsequent meeting, but after the revenue neutral rate hearing, then you may have your public hearing to adopt your budget. That creates an interesting situation for Saline County for this year. Customarily, we have always noticed the county budget and all the fire district budgets for adoption on the same day. You do them all together. This year, the county, if we do not plan to exceed the revenue neutral rate, we would still need to adopt a budget prior to August 15th and transmit it to the clerk prior to August 25th. But the fire districts could not adopt their budgets until at least August 20th. So that's an interesting situation. There are a couple of different options, perhaps more than one option to how we could address that. One is that we could go ahead and hold a revenue neutral rate hearing for the county. That's a little bit odd how we would do that, because the law contemplates only holding that hearing if you're proposing to exceed the rate. So, I mean, I guess we could shove an extra $1 million of expenditure authority in there just to make that happen. Or we could hold the hearing without actually exceeding the rate. But that's one possibility. A second possibility is to just divorce the fire district adoption process from the county adoption process. That would require noticing everything separately, which you would think is not that big of a deal, other than the fact that there's an additional incremental cost. But it would probably require us, because the lack of specificity on the notice of the fire districts to their budget publication, which is normally an addendum to the overall county publication. We'd probably have to add some additional verbiage to that publication to satisfy the notice requirements. Another possibility, have not discussed this one with the clerk yet, is there does happen to be one commission meeting that falls into that sweet spot that's after August 20th, which is the first day we can hold the R&R hearing, and prior to August 25th, which is when the budgets are due to the clerk if you are not having the R&R hearing. So if we noticed everything for that meeting, which happens to be August 24th, just looked, there's the possibility that we could still do everything correctly and meet the time requirements correctly, assuming everything went perfectly with the adoption and there were no delays. That was a really long answer to your question.
To a non-question. That was not, it wasn't even a question.
We discussed this at length last week, and I'm just trying to figure out how all this fit together and in the final outcome. And
Yeah, because one of the pieces of direction that I would desire from the commission is what do you want to do about that? So I really see, you could ask me to go back and cut the fire districts and say, get them down to their revenue neutral rates, whatever you have to do. That's one possibility. You could direct me to go ahead and have the hearing for the county, whatever we need to do with that, or you could direct me to have a conversation with the clerk about whether August 24th is a possibility.
If I can regress just a little bit to finish up with Commissioner Vidrickson's concerns, I think it's prudent that we would at least ask them the amount of funds that they received from the CARES Act. I don't think that that's a burden to them. It could be done in an email. I would think also that would be helpful for the consultant to find out what's out there, because I'm assuming some of those groups are going to come to us again for that $8.7 million. And it's just information that would be helpful. Would that be appropriate,
I
Commissioner?
appreciate the backup there. And that was going to be my suggestion too, when I got in
Okay.
here, was to do this electronically. I mean, they can do it pretty easily without having to spend a couple hours to come down here and talk to us. We direct staff to contact these agencies and provide the information that we're asking for. And then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, and I would caution them to not overthink this, that we're thinking about cutting the budget. I just think more information is better than less, especially when you're talking about this amount of money. All these organizations that are asking for money are fantastic organizations. They do great work, and it's not my intent in asking for that to, oh, you got that much money, now we're going to take it away. You had mentioned one time a long time ago when I was thinking about awarding more, you were saying there's a pot of money out there for a lot of people, restaurants or whatever. It would be interesting. So if that's not too much of a burden, I would appreciate it.
And it's certainly very doable. Thank you.
I have an additional request for you, Phil. We're looking at an 11.7% increase in our budget over last year. And you and I have talked about this, so I kind of have a good feeling for this, but you can explain it much better than I. So I'd like for you to explain it in general, how we can increase our budget by 11.7%. Yet we're talking about a revenue neutral mill levy and probably not an increase in taxes. So how does that happen?
Well, not an increase in property taxes. I think that's a key distinction. So the largest contributor, so last year's total county budget was about 52.4 million. The budget that's proposed for in front of you today is $59.4 million. So that's about a $7 million increase. And as you mentioned, Commissioner, no proposed increase in the mill rate. And so how is that possible? Well, the biggest contributor to that increase in total county budget is the new debt service fund, the bond and interest fund, which is proposed to be established to make the payments on two general obligation debt service issues in 2021. The first being the debt service that we issued on behalf of the fire districts. That's a relatively small amount, but the biggie being the proposed $75 million issue for the jail that we will have coming up here in August. And so the debt service for 2022 on those two issues combines to be a total amount of $5,744,894. So basically $5.75 million that is added to the budget. That's brand new expenditure authority for 2022, but will not be paid from property tax. Not that it's not going to be paid from taxes. It's going to be paid from the sales tax that the voters approved last November and went into effect on April 1. So we received our first payment from the new sales tax last week, actually. The treasurer's office and I had a conversation sorting all that out about what goes into what bucket. So we are holding those sales tax funds in a new special revenue fund called jail sales tax. And then we'll be making monthly transfers once the bonds are actually issued. We'll be making monthly transfers from that jail sales tax fund to the new debt service fund in order to pay the cost of those bonds. So 5.75 million of that $7 million increase is due to that single factor. There are some other increases in other funds. So the general fund, for example, is proposed to increase. The largest increase in the general fund is related to the adding of new positions in the sheriff's office. So again, a jail-related expense. Our plan has been to staff up the number of new deputies needed to staff that jail over a 3-year period. We just don't think it's realistic to hire them all at one time. So we were going to staff them up in 22, 23, and 24. And so there is an increase associated with that in the general fund. And if you look at the tax rate, the tax rate for the general fund actually does increase slightly compared to the current year, but we are saved by the fact that some of the other funds' tax rates are decreasing. Public health, for example, they came into this year with a relatively healthy fund balance, again, due in part to some of the COVID money that they received. And so they are requiring less tax revenue for 22 than they have in the past. Similarly, our employee benefits fund, their tax rate is dropping just a little bit. So those other funds are covering that small tax rate increase for the general fund.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, we've got a $5.75 million debt service that we've added to our budget. However, on the revenue side, we're going to recoup a great big part of that from the sales tax. Correct?
Yeah, virtually 100%. It will 100% of it will be recouped either from the sales tax or from transfers from the fire districts.
So in other words, yes, our budget is increasing by that 5.7, but we're going to recoup that back on the revenue side. So it's going to offset. So it looks like we're getting a big increase when really we're spending more, but we're really not.
Well, we're really
really
spending
spending
it, but it's not coming from the property taxpayers. It's coming from the sales.
And it was voter
taxpayers.
approved.
Yeah, voter approved.
And voter approved, yeah. All right, thank you.
I want to thank you and your staff for all the hard work that goes into this. This is the 7 years I've been on the county. This is probably the most readable budget that I've seen. So
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Couple minor questions. I noticed the drug court salaries went down significantly, and it says adjusted per review. I don't remember that conversation. Are they?
There is a sheriff's deputy who was that position was added at the time that we decided to establish drug court.
Okay.
And that person has been paid out of the drug court budget since that was established. However, drug court is essentially 1 day a week, and the other 4 days a week, that person does court security. And so Director Grievous and the sheriff had a conversation during the budget process and said, you know, it's really not fair for drug court to be absorbing that cost. It's really
Correct.
Yeah. So 80% of the cost of that position was transferred out of the drug court budget to the sheriff's budget. And that's what accounts for that decrease.
On the juvenile center, how long of a contract do we have with them? Do we know?
I will have to look that up and get
It's-
back to you.
I mean, it's a constant thing. I just, there's so very few of them, and that's a lot of money. But I just couldn't remember if we passed a 10-year contract with them in the past.
I'm going to claim that that's one of those before my time
Okay.
things.
No,
So
no.
I will look it up and get back to you.
The number is similar, so it's not affecting the budget. And then on the senior services, it looks like effectively taxpayers are funding that around $460,000 after revenue. Does anybody, we used to just write them a check. Does anybody remember what that amount was?
It was in the 300, about 323, I thought.
Okay.
And that was probably in 2017 or 18.
Again, this would be a situation where I don't want to think that anybody to think that that's not appropriate. I just wanted that information.
Yes, and I will say, Commissioner Shadwick, I think I have shot a little low on their revenues as well. I hope that the net won't actually be that high. Rosie has a good track record of bringing in additional revenues, but I wanted to be very conservative on the revenue side, just as we still continue to come out of COVID and not knowing what the trends are going to be at the senior
Well,
center.
and Rosie and her staff does a fantastic job there. So I was just trying to figure out the bottom line of what taxpayers are funding.
Yeah, it definitely has inched up over time.
And then then I'll shut up after this. Sorry, guys. Your final question for direction about the dates is my choice would be to get with Jamie and figure out if that date works. And wasn't that one of the options?
That is one of the options.
Okay. Thanks. I'm done.
Okay. There's also a 30% request increase from the Fair Board. I think 33%, and because we gave them 20,000 last year, and they're asking for, says here, $30,000 fair request. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, that's what they requested when they, I believe it was the chair of the board that came and presented to the commission in May.
help me with last year's fair request. Was that monies even appropriated to them since COVID was here? They still had a real scaled down 4-H ribbon type judging of stock and that, but it was very limited. But were they appropriated funds last year?
Um,
And if so,
so, okay, so there's sort of multiple years here. So the 20, for the 2020 budget, which would have been adopted in 2019, Mr. Manley's time, my understanding was that the commission chose at that time to only appropriate 20,000. There had been a concert or something the year before and that it had gone up, but then it came back down. So for 2020, I believe we only appropriated to them 20,000. As it turned out, COVID happened and the fair was different than it had been in the past. Last year in 2020, they came in front of the commission and I believe requested 30,000 for this year. And the commission, we were having the conversation about the expo and so forth. And so the commission, I'm pretty sure last year you said, no, let's hang at 20,000 for what would be 2021. Obviously that fair has not occurred yet. That'll be coming up here shortly. And then for next year, they've requested 30,000 again. But my understanding is that that request, rather than a concert or something like they've tried to do in the past, that request was to sort of enhance some of the 4-H. Maybe you can help me out, Mr. Chair, since you're sitting on that board, but I think that's sort of the cycle that we've been through here.
A lot of different things are happening because one of the biggest issues is with this being the last year using the stadium over there for any rodeos, demo derbies, or anything that's going to happen this year. So one of the things that they've looked at is, okay, what do they do next year? Because that won't be there. We won't be able to utilize that over there at all. One of their things is having more inside the TPEC Center. And of course, their costs go up dramatically when that happens, because there's a large cost that the fair board has to then rent that. And to have the rodeos in there, if they would determine that that's where they're going to have a rodeo in there, then they subsequently have to store their animals at the sale barn or someplace else off bumps and truck them there, get them in and out of there, and then do all this. So there's a lot of costs being involved once that stadium is gone. And this will be the last year there. So that's one of the reasons. That is one of the biggest reasons why they're wanting an increase in their budget.
I believe in the presentation, it was 4-H related, the 10,000.
It is.
And what's happening with 4-H
Well,
where will that 10,000 enhance the 4-H?
Well, it's because with and I'd have to think about that for a second. And I don't know. I'm drawing a blank on that. Excuse me. I would have to.
Well, I'm looking at the 2020 budget and I recall pretty clearly, I think that we gave the fair $20,000. That was the total amount that we gave them for 2020. But in this overview of the budget, I don't see anything, unless I'm just overlooking. I've looked at about 5 times. I can't find that $20,000. So I don't know. That's what we've given them on a regular basis is $20,000.
Yeah, and it's a little, so the county has appropriated that money out of the county farm fund, which is a non-budgeted fund. So it's never actually in the county budget. But that's why I put some of those non-budgeted funds on your list this year, because you do, you have a policy decision, right, that you all have to make, even though it's not technically a budget decision.
So the non-budgeted, that would be the $4,500 for conservation, the $400 for women in ag, and $30,000 fair request. That's the,
Yeah, those are the requests
Yes.
that we have traditionally funded out of that county farm non-budgeted fund.
In regard to the proposed 22 budget, I'm comfortable with it. I'm a little unclear in regards to you meeting with the county clerk in regards to the resolution for the revenue neutral rate. And how does this all play? And will we officially act on this on next Tuesday, or what's the plan?
So, yeah, I would plan to bring this back to you again next Tuesday. I've heard some direction to try and get some information from some of these allocation agencies. Hopefully they get back to me in time that I could present that to you. The other thing that I would need to do is if everybody's comfortable with where the fire districts are, and there's no direction to go back and slash their budgets, then I would need to do a revenue neutral rate resolution for the fire districts, so that I could transmit that to the clerk before the 20th. And then assuming we can make that date work, we would not notice everything for August 10th, which was our original plan. We would instead notice everything for August 24th. So there would be about a month lull in there while, things are in the newspaper and you all receive feedback from your constituents, et cetera. And then we would come back and actually adopt everything on August 24th.
You get all that done between now and next Tuesday?
One can hope, but we do have 1 week play in there. If it can't be done for next Tuesday, it can be done on the 20th.
Good luck with it.
Thank you.
Wow. So our plan of action here is to pass this RFA in the budget direction that you have in front of us.
I believe the direction that I have received thus far is to contact the allocation agencies and inquire of them how much they have received from outside sources, particularly the CARES Act and other federal stimulus, and report that back to the commission, and to also report back the length of the juvenile center contract.
That can be put on hold. You can just text to me or.
Okay, all right. So basically, all I have is just the outside agencies. I'm not sure where we are in that fair conversation, but we could take that up again next Tuesday if so desired.
Well, we're not actually passing RFA. This is just a budget discussion about this RFA. So you're not looking for any motion today. You're just looking for direction, and I believe you've gotten it. Or do you feel like?
Yeah, I mean, so since it is an RFA, if you did want to make a motion, you could make a motion to continue the discussion to next Tuesday. That would be, or we could just let it die and bring it back next Tuesday.
That would be up to the chair, I guess.
Is everybody okay with just letting it die and moving on until next Tuesday?
That'll work.
Yes. Are there any questions or comments by the public who wish to speak? Any other commissioners have anything?
Nope.
Okay,
Thank you.
you bet. At this time, we'll move into informational items. Item 1.
Road and Bridge update with Darren Fischel, Road and Bridge Administrator.
Good morning, Darren.
Commissioners. This is our bi-monthly update for May and June. I've got a slide presentation here. Brad's pulling up. We did have, next slide, please. We did have some flooding on May 16th. This is a screenshot of the Coco Ross website. That's a community collaboration rain, hail, and snow network comprised of private citizens that report rainfall and snow to this organization. So you see up in the northeast part of the county, there's some 6.5 inches rain. We did have some reports of locally or even of 8 inches of rain in some areas. Next slide, please. This is the National Weather Service report of the rain for that day. As you can see, some that 6 to 8 inches is still pretty consistent with what was reported on the ground. Next slide, please. So that correlated into most of the damage being directed at the northeast and north central portion of the county. Next slide, please. This is a screenshot of my cartograph software. Let me bring this a little bit to you. This 229,000 is the total that our department has expended so far in this repair. This labor cost here is already built into our budget. So that isn't money that we had to spend because of the salaries. So you look over here and then you go to equipment. Most of this is not really dollars that we had to spend. There's a little bit of money in there for diesel that we used, but this is what we would report to FEMA had this been a disaster because of the equipment we used and their hourly rate. So the material, that's an actual cost to us. I believe our budget can absorb that amount right now. This other was the cost of some concrete and stuff for some repairs. So this is what we would have just reported to FEMA. There wasn't enough dollar amount in the 5-county area for this event, so it's not going to be a FEMA event. So next slide, please. So this is a screenshot of where all of the damage occurred. This every orange, highlighted orange, represents where we sent a crew to do some work, or a motor grader was there blading the road due to the heavy events. Next slide, please. So with the flooding, we get drift. Drift material clogs up our boxes, our bridges, and when the rain comes again, if we don't get it out of there, it does significant damage. So I did add some slides to kind of put it a little bit in perspective. Next slide, please. So this is a box choked up with drift. Now, when we have these events and we think they might be a FEMA event, we have to measure those piles, and this is how we do that. Next slide, please. Once an area is cleared out, we put a person there with a stick that has the feet, a surveyor stick, and then they can, from that photo, they can extrapolate the length, the height, and the distance. So then they calculate the cubic yards, and that's how they pay for those. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And so it also gives you a little bit of perspective when you just see a picture and it's standing in a box and then how much there actually was there. Next slide, please. So based on the winds, we have what they call loose soils, which is sandy conditions. And so there are a lot of trees in that part of the county that just don't have a good purchase on the ground. So when we get some high winds, we do get blowdowns. And so we have to go out and clean those up. Next slide, please. So this is an area up in the northeast. As you can see, this dark spot right here. This is a hill coming down towards, this is an actual intersection that goes down this way. So this exposed that culvert and then washed all this silt into this culvert. But you can see over here on the west, there is on the right, I'm sorry, there's a culvert on this side of the intersection and a culvert on this side of the intersection. So when it flooded, it came down here and washed down this roadway here. Next slide, please. So we took a look at everything that was involved with this intersection and cleaning the culverts and the ditches and seeding afterwards. Next slide, please. So in this instance, and not all, some of this was already plugged up. We replaced all of these culverts and then regraded the road and seeded the ditches. Next slide, please. And this is that road that was going to the south. You can see as it came down and it washed out here. And here's that culvert that was on the other side of that road. We did some sloping and seeding here, and a few rock checks in here to try to keep the erosion down. Next slide, please. Also, one of the things we did, as you'll notice here, this entrance right here is lower than the road now. So if there is a heavy rain, it might be not an 8-inch rain, but the water will go over that intersection to that other culvert before washing down this road. And hopefully we can mitigate some of that damage on the next one. Next slide, please. So here's Simpson Road. This is one of those instances where they say, we talk about turn around, don't drown. The water doesn't look that deep relative to the rest of the surrounding area. Next slide, please. So there might not be a road there. That's one of the reasons you don't want to drive into water, regardless of how good it may look relative, because the other picture, the water was just straight across here, but theirs was nothing underneath there. Next slide, please. This is another example of some where, if you were there at the time, the water would have looked just level across the road here, but there would have actually been no road. This is probably a 6 to 8 inch cut. Next slide, please. So this is an intersection up in the northeast corner. You see the drift right here, and you look at the two cultivate fields to the either side, and you go, well, where did that come from? That came from those trees up in there. One of the things about this intersection is 1 inch of rain over 1 acre is 30,000 gallons of water. So this is a 600 acre tract right up in here. So at one point on an 8-inch rain, there was 144 million gallons of water came across this intersection. So it's surprising that it's in good a shape as it is. But we get a lot of this drift that even ends up in the middle of the roads. Next slide, please. So we have a lot of wash on the intersection. This is probably about a mile from that other picture. Next slide, please. This is a picture of where the motor grader was sitting and the road was gone. This is where we went in, we rebuilt the road and then cleaned the ditches out. And that right there is that culvert that you saw exposed. Next slide, please. So one thing about flood water is it's typically perpendicular to the natural flow of the water. There's a box down here, and as the water came over the road, it washed all the aggregate out of the road into the ditch. And so on a normal rain or something like that, the water would flow off the road and then down to that box. But all of this is plugged. So we have to go out immediately, if not sooner, and remove this before the grass starts growing in it. Because once the grass starts growing in it, it becomes impossible to detect where the ditch was and where it ends. If we do it now, we don't have to get a locate because we're just simply retrieving material. Next slide, please. Another picture of that same area. Next slide, please. So what we'll do is we'll go in there with an excavator and remove that down to the existing, and we'll put it up along the side of the road here. And then the rural patrolman over time can work that back across the road. When he gets, right now wouldn't be a good time to do it because it's wet and you just end up with a lot of loose material, but it's good material. And so there's no reason not to get it up there where you can use it eventually. Next slide, please. Same here. It just puts it up here in the windrow and it'll get worked back into the road. Next slide, please. This is an area where we had a slide. This is just west of Ohio Street, or east of Ohio Street, I'm sorry. You can see where the water had come up this high and just swirled right there in front of that pole and ate and the soil got so damp it just slid down the deck. Next slide, please. There's the repair. Next slide, please. This was up on Headville Road. This is actually a slide. No water came down here and rode this. It just got so saturated and the fore slope is so steep, it just sloughed off. So we had to close that road and do the repairs. Next slide, please. So the first thing we did was we went in and excavated the old material. This is probably about a 10-foot drop right here. So due to this right here and the one imminent collapse and safety for workers, we had to find a way to contain this. Next slide, please. So we purchased these Lego blocks and then we went in there and made a base and then we stacked them along there. One, to keep this from collapsing even more and more damage and the safety of the workers. And we put a drain pipe in there back behind it. So if there is any water get back in there or if a spring should develop, it has a way to drain. Next slide, please. Then once that's done, we're able to get in there and compact this earth back up and make the fore slope. Next slide, please. This is the geotextile grid, and this is we put the fence back. The fence was down here too. Next slide, please. And then just add some slope protection, just in case that for future if it happened to do it again. Next slide, please. So this shows, that's the end of the flood stuff. This shows a project we were working on before the flood started. We had some shoulder projects we were working on. This was on Brookville Road from State Street to Watkins. This is an ongoing project for our department to provide an edge wedge right here along this asphalt for people that drift off of the roadway. We've done 16 miles this year. I know there is going to be a shoulder project with some contract work that engineering's putting together for some areas. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. We did replace some culverts after we got some of the flood. Also on the flood, we only have 3 areas that we need to repair. We're almost 98% complete with that. So that'll free some of the crews up to get back to doing our maintenance work. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is a repair that was out on State Street and K-140. We found this hole during our Durapatch. This pink line here represents how big the actual hole is under the asphalt. This was a concrete culvert that had separated, and when the water flowed through it, it just ate all the earth out, leaving a void underneath there. Next slide, please. So we replaced it with a continuous pipe that doesn't have any joints in it. So we had to put this new one in here and compact the soil. And because of its location, next slide, please. We added some flowable fill to keep it from sinking. You think about where this is at around this curve, there's going to be a lot of braking heavy truck traffic on this. So we put flowable fill in there and then put asphalt on it. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is on old 40 east of town. We got a call from a lady. Her culvert was plugged up. We do have some things that just trigger. We're going to replace this culvert, and what triggers that is this head wall right here. When people do depart the roadway and they hit these, it becomes very dangerous for them and their cars. You know, when this was built, this was the way to keep erosion from around. Nobody had any thought for driver safety at that time. Plus, cars were a little bit bigger. The odds are with a big old car from back in the 60s and 70s, it probably would have gone right over the top of that. But with the lower build of cars these days, it just becomes a battering ram that they hit. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. We do take concerns and requests from all the citizens of Saline County, and every once in a while we get some help. This gentleman had called, and his culvert was, he wanted a longer culvert. He wanted to extend his culvert so he could drive a semi in there. One of the things that we do when somebody requests an extended culvert is we go out and look at the existing culvert. If the existing culvert isn't in any good shape, or if it's in need of replacement, all they have to do is simply purchase the extension piece. We provide 24 feet and a band, and we will put it on while we're there. If the culvert is in good shape, then it's up to them to do the work to extend the culvert. This one, the culvert was actually, it was all rusted and in need of replacement. Next slide, please. So this is the piece that he purchased, and this is the 24 feet that we provide. By the same token, if this was already a 35 or 40 foot culvert, we would replace a 35 or 40 foot culvert, but we install that while we're there. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. We repaired or replaced 344 signs or posts. I expect that number to go up due to harvest. Harvest is near its end of its completion, and we set barricades. This map here represents May through June miles that were maintained. So when we talk about the motor grader operators, this is the roads that they reported maintaining during that 2-month period, which was 2,035 miles. We also hauled 11,270 ton rock, 3,420 ton of AB3, 4,235 ton of sand, and 4,609 ton of dirt. Next slide, please. This map represents minus the flood damage, where we had a task that was related to re-rocking the mile during the 2 months. Next slide, please. This map represents all of the lengths of gravel that were resanded. Next slide, please. This map represents everywhere in Saline County that a truck was sent with a load of aggregate to either repair or fix a problem. Next slide. We also, because harvest is over, we'll be concentrating on doing the laybacks, cleaning the ditches and moving that material back out into the field. We do have plans to replace a culvert on Niles Road south of Tinkler. We have 2 roads that we're going to build for the radio tower site. One is about a half-mile stretch of already, both of these are on county-owned properties, Crittenden, and then a piece down by Assaria, Kansas. And then we still plan on trying to upgrade Thatcher Road from Crystal Springs to Ohio from earth to gravel. And our budget is within line with traditional normals. And I do believe if we don't have any more rain or disasters, we will be able to absorb that.
Very good. Thank you. Any comments or questions or anything by the commission?
Darren, a few months ago, we promised the landowners down there south of the shooting range that we would replace that pipe across there. Has that been taken care of?
No, but I hope, firmly believe and hope within the next 2 weeks that will be done.
I would hope so. We told them we'd get at that as quickly as we could.
And we are going to be out there as quickly as we can.
And one other thing is, while you're here, Darren, is would you comment on the speed limit on Simpson Road between Magnolia and Country Club?
The speed limit on Magnolia and Country Club was reduced in an effort to, it was recognized that there is an issue with the shoulders through the LRSP, and speaking with the engineer, he decided to lower the speed limit until the shoulders are widened. And then once the shoulders are widened, the speed limit will resume to 55.
Okay. Thank you for that. And all right. Well, thank you for that update. Item number 2.
County Administrator's update with Philip Smith Haynes, County Administrator.
Good morning, Philip.
Good morning, Commissioners. A number of different items to chat about today. Let's start with your consent calendar. So we talked last week about adding new items to the consent calendar. As a consequence of that, the clerk and I had a conversation, and with adding those additional items, we're going to be requesting now a motion and a second on the consent calendar just for recording purposes. So we modeled that this morning, and I know I got a couple puzzled looks, but that's why that occurred today. Broadcasting of your commission meetings. So last Monday evening, the Salina City Commission made a decision to terminate their relationship with Salina Media Connection. And so I didn't actually find out about that until Tuesday morning after your commission meeting. We had a number of different conversations last week about what to do about that. I want to thank our IT staff, Brad and Kevin and Phil and Lauren. They put in a lot of effort over this past week because the city of Salina, since yesterday was a holiday, the city did not have a commission meeting yesterday. And so the city has made some arrangements to have Their commission meetings continue to be broadcast, but we weren't quite sure whether that was going to include us and to what extent. And so our IT staff made a very strong push last week to make sure that we will have public access to this meeting this morning via Zoom and YouTube. It looks like we're actually on channel 20 this morning, but we weren't sure until at least Friday whether that was going to happen or not. So again, thanks to our IT staff. We will be continuing those conversations with the city, and they have some folks who are helping them out on a temporary basis. And then I'm also scheduling a meeting with Saline Media Connection as well. So we will come up with a plan and bring it back in front of the commission at some point. But it was a little bit of a scramble last week. So again, appreciate our IT staff. Housing. As you know, housing is an issue in the community and that we've been dealing with. And so a few different things. As I reported last Tuesday, did have a meeting with the city and some of their folks regarding their rural housing incentive district. I have a meeting this afternoon with the consultant who's working on that project on behalf of the developers. I'm going to try and encourage them to have some communications with this commission to make sure that are kept in the loop on those plans moving forward. I also was invited to a meeting out at the old Ambassador Hotel last week. There is a developer that has approached the city and some folks in the community about renovating that hotel facility and a couple of other hotels into possible apartment living. And so that was a neat community charrette that they held. And having moved to the community after that building closed, I had never been in there before, so that was a neat experience. North Central Kansas Regional Planning Commission is also doing a housing program, and this is specific for houses outside of Salina, or houses that do not have a Salina address. So not just outside of the city limits, but outside of the Salina zip code. And I've given a handout to each of the commissioners about that program. It's geared towards first-time home buyers. And so, we're talking all aspects of housing. We're talking new development, we're talking redevelopment, we're talking, helping people acquire existing homes. So lot going on in the housing space. It is, believe it or not, time to start thinking about legislation for 2022. So the Kansas Association of Counties sent out their legislative request form this past week. So I'd encourage commissioners to start thinking about whether there are some legislative items that we should advocate for in KAC's platform for next year. I know I've had one conversation with a department head about an item. So we will try and gather some ideas and bring that back to you. But that time is right around the corner. I already mentioned that our ARPA survey will be going live today. And last but not least, I will be attending, I guess I should air quote attending, virtually attending the National Association of Counties Conference this weekend. It starts on Friday and runs through Monday. Looks like a lot of good information. I hope to report back to you next Tuesday on what I learned from that. I think that covers everything on my list. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? by the commission? Okay, item 3.
Commissioners' comments?
I'm good. Anybody?
I have none.
None. Announcements. No announcements. Okay. Anything else anybody like to speak about? Okay, hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Have a great day. And Monty?